Hi, my name is Grant Clark. I am a 12th grader from Pinckney High School, and the main reason why I want to participate in today's event because I have a great deal of interest in politics. I lead my school's politics club, and I'm very interested in data analytics revolving elections. So hopefully I can find a career in it in the future. So thank you for having me for today's event. So thank you for joining us, Ms. Bettes. And so could you please give us about a 1-minute introduction about yourself before we start the questioning?
Okay, thank you for having me. My name is Donnie Bettes. I'm a former teacher and a family physician, and I now do urgent care. I want to bring my compassion for others to deal with issues that are affecting the constituents of State District 42. I wasn't always a physician. In fact, I'm a product of the American dream. My parents moved to Michigan from very low paying jobs. They were able to get jobs with good union benefits and good pay, and they were able to buy a house in a middle class neighborhood. I was able to go to public schools and also to public supported community colleges and state colleges to earn all my degrees. But unfortunately, that path to the middle class is not available to a lot of young people because of the erosion of workers' rights and the high cost of education, among other things. As your representative, I would work to repair those avenues to the middle class for everyone. I have based my career on looking at people's needs, analyzing the data based on proven facts, and that's how I would work as your representative at the state level. It's time we have a physician / person who believes in science as opposed to politicians.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Bettes. So I think we're going to start the questioning now. So for each question, I'll ask you a question. You'll have about 2 minutes to respond to each question.
Okay.
So my first question is, what would you consider your top 3 priorities and or critical issues that you would address if you were elected?
Okay, the top 3 issues I would address, of course, climate change is a very important issue because if we don't take care of that, then we don't have much of a future. So I would look at looking at alternative ways to produce energy in Michigan, energy that's non-polluting, and also ways that would produce jobs for people, such as improved batteries, electric batteries, electric energy, wind energy. Also education, we have to invest in the future, and the best way to invest in the future is in our young people. You are the future. I would like to see lowering the cost of education, possibly grants to supplement at least the first 2 years of education, and then we need jobs. So when you get out of school, there's something available for you to do and not have to move out of Michigan for those jobs.
Okay, so thank you. So my second question is, how would you ensure that Michigan's economy would survive the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically small businesses in the job market?
Okay, we've been lucky in Michigan because of our governor's policy to slowly open things up. We've had fewer deaths than in other parts of the country, and we need to be giving loans to our small businesses to help them open. She has done some programs, but we need to do more. Unfortunately, the federal government has not stepped in. They do have the power to release more stimulus money right now. They were able to give $1 trillion tax cut to the 1%. They need to be giving money to help small businesses and the people here in Michigan. They were looking at a possible $3 billion budget deficit here in Michigan. But because of increased more revenues than we thought, and also money left from the federal government, we're less than $1 billion short, and they were able to shift that to 2021. So we do have enough money right now that we did not have to make cuts in education or in revenue sharing. So we're okay for 2021, but 2022, we don't know. But slowly opening the business back up and giving grants to the businesses to help get them open is what we need to do, and what Governor Gretchen is doing. And unfortunately, she's meeting resistance for the opposition party. I would support what she is doing and be there to continue to support her policies that she's doing so well on.
Okay, thank you. So I have one last question. What kind of policies would you pursue to promote equal funding per pupil for K through 12 education in Michigan?
Well, like I said, we did not have to cut funding at all for schools, and because people are our future, we need to make sure we don't cut funding for them. And we need to look at also maintaining our teachers, continuing their pay. And I think it's unfortunate that all the taxes that people have, the only one they can vote on is a school tax. And people tend to take out their aggravation or their frustration on high taxes on schools. So we need to find another way to help supplement schools. And our big priority should be more money to schools. I know we do get some through the lottery, but they talk about increasing taxes. Governor Whitmer suggested an increased gasoline tax. People weren't happy with that. Now, back when Governor Snyder was in office, they suggested increasing the personal gains tax. And so that is something we could do, increase the earned income tax for people and also increase personal deductions on people who make under $400,000 a year. So that would not affect poor people or the middle class people. We would shift the burden to the people who make most of the money here in Michigan. And we could use that to supplement our schools and continue to provide the best education for our young people, such as wet labs, STEM classes. I'd like to see more vocational training. So when you get out, you can get a job or supplement your income while you are furthering an advanced education and advanced degree.
Okay, well, thank you for your time today.
Okay, well, good luck with your career in politics. And education is always a wonderful investment, so don't stop learning. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I first want to thank Ms. Bettes and the Livingston County Alliance for hosting this really awesome event I'm super excited to be a part of. And like she said, my name is Joseph Straight. I'm a senior at Hartland High School, and I really want to be a part of this event because I'm actually a first-time voter this year. I turned 18 November 2nd, so I really want to get a chance to get to know the candidates better and get involved, and I love politics, so this is super awesome for me. Our first thing, I want to say thanks for coming on here, Representative Bolin. Am I saying your name correctly?
Bolin, you're right.
Awesome.
Good job.
First, we're going to have a minute introduction to introduce yourself and let us know your story, your thoughts, and and then we'll move on to the questions from there.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. I really appreciate the enthusiasm, and I can remember getting really excited and interested in politics and just the whole process when I was in high school also. So to be a state representative today is a whole lot different than being the class treasurer, I'll tell you that. But I am Representative Ann Bolin, and I currently serve the southeast corner of Livingston County, which consists of the city of Brighton, the village of Pinckney, Putnam, Hamburg, Green Oak, Genoa, and Green Oak and Brighton townships. And prior to being elected as the state representative, I was a township clerk. I'm known as an active community leader, served as the former chair of the Greater Brighton Area Chamber of Council. I was very active in my church. Of course, my kids grew up here. And also I currently serve and have served on the Livingston County Community Alliance Marijuana Committee and Livingston Community Water Authority. I continue to be active in my church and in the community. As state rep, my top priorities were to be a budget hawk, to support continued investments in our infrastructure and support our job providers in a strong business climate and ensure election integrity. I've successfully navigated the Lansing landscape to ensure that Livingston County values are representative. I'm a strong conservative that is 100% pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and I believe the best solutions are found by the people and not by the government. My committee assignments have enabled me to be a budget hawk as I serve on the Appropriations Committee and 6 subcommittees, overseeing over 84% of the state's budget. I serve as a freshman legislator as a vice chair of 2 of those committees, which is really a great honor. I've successfully advocated for accountability and transparency, negotiated spending cuts, reduction of overlapping programs, worked hard to find solutions based on cash on hand, not on the shoulders of Michigan families or the backs of small businesses. I've been a proponent for more investments in our roads based on the 2015 roads plan and existing revenues, and greatly supported programs that protect our Great Lakes and address the PFAS issue. We continue to invest in career tech and vocational opportunities to expand our skilled trade workforce. There's been a great effort towards looking at occupational licensing requirements and opportunities in workforce housing alternatives, which are much needed in our county. While we are working through COVID, we are also working on policy reforms that will help move Michigan forward. There really is a wide middle lane in Lansing, and we really do, in most cases, try to work closely together. And we will continue to do that. The legislative session, we have been able to pass some significant policy reforms with that wide middle lane, including auto no-fault reform, raise the age, some criminal justice reforms, occupational licensing, and civil asset forfeiture. Our work is not over. We must do all we can to ensure a healthy economy, support strong families, keep our communities safe, invest in our infrastructure, and maintain integrity in elections. I'll continue to work tirelessly as your voice in Lansing to ensure that Livingston County values are represented and remains a great place to live, work, and play. I'm always free to make myself available. I can be contacted at my website, annbolin.com, or ann4rep@gmail.com. So that's annbolin.com, ann4rep@gmail.com.
Thank you, Representative Bolin. We'll move on to the questions now. You'll have 2 minutes to answer each question. Our first question is, what do you consider your top 3 priorities and/or critical issues you will address if you are elected?
Okay, so I'm going to start at one. I think the most important issues right now is election integrity. All right, I am working hard now, and I will continue to work to make sure that every eligible voter can vote freely, secretly, independently, safely, and securely. I think it's more important than ever to make sure that we do that, okay? Secondly, we need to move through COVID, and that means making sure that we have a strong economy, safely and responsibly returning to the robust economy and returning Michigan to prosperity. And there's a lot that falls under that umbrella of jobs in the economy, including making sure that we have good schools, that we're tech schools, vocational schools, our kids can read, and move through school, and that they're prepared for the jobs that are jobs of the future, and working to retrain our workforce as well. And I also think extremely important is continuing to work on our roads. 2 years ago, that's all we heard about, the roads, right? Nothing has changed. We still need to address our infrastructure needs that have been long underfunded and unattended to. So we see the 2015 roads plan. We see orange barrels all over the place, but now we need to focus on a better way to divide up the money to get to the driveways and the byways, not just the highways.
Thank you. Our next question is, what we do to help Michigan's economy during the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically small businesses and the job market?
All right, so, COVID-19 certainly presented a lot of challenges. We've never been through something like this, right? As a state, and certainly not in any of our lifetimes. And so one of the most important things that I did that I felt was really important was to reach out to the community, including the business community, to find out what their needs were. We know that we're going to move through COVID. So while we move through it, and then what's on the other side of the fence, if you will, I held close to 20 roundtables with different economic sectors where I invited people in and asked a very specific set of questions. How are things going? What did you see were the biggest challenges? How are you preparing? What did you need? Did you have access to adequate PPE? Resources just getting in place. People are used to an office, and the requirements are very different when you're outfitting an office versus now everybody's working from home, making sure their systems are secure. So kind of serving as definitely trying to find out to pave the path forward, and then to try and coordinate resources and collaborate on their behalf.
Thank you. Our final question is, what will you do to help pursue equal funding per student in K-12 education throughout Michigan?
All right, so equal funding of schools is very, it's a very it's just a simple sentence that means a whole lot of different things. I want to make sure that every student in Michigan has access to a quality education, that they can read and they can write and they can move through school and pursue a path, whatever that path is for them. And equal funding, we have done a lot of things, and I will continue to support initiatives that allow not necessarily tunneling the money. And so you have to pay, X percent of the foundation allowance goes towards staffing. I want to give that priority, that decision, to the local school districts. I think they know best how to spend the money. So for example, in the Upper Peninsula, they may not have as much of a need for they don't need as many computers, for example. They have fewer students, but they need a lot more money for transportation, right? So trying to give them the information, the money they need, so they can decide how to divvy it up. And certainly we need to be basing it on, we need to encourage good, solid education outcomes. And if we have bad investments, we need to make sure that we're correct them. And that doesn't mean leave anybody behind. That means to work to bring everybody up together.
Thank you. I really enjoy this conversation so much. Thank you for coming on here. This is so exciting for me.
Oh, this is exciting for me too. I really appreciate it. I wish you the best. And again, you can reach me at annforrep@gmail.com or annbolin.com. That's ANNBOLLIN.com. All right?
All right, so hi, Mr. Smitty. My name is Zoe Rector-Brooks, and I am the senior class president at Howell High School. Just to give you some background on who I am and why I'm doing this, I am super interested in politics and hope to pursue political science in college next year. So I am very excited to be helping out with this event. So to begin, I'd love it if you could do a 1-minute introduction of yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, number one, and hope you have good luck next year in college, and good for you, by the way, getting in there. I'm Adam Smitty. I'm originally from Livingston County. I graduated Brighton High School in 2004 and immediately enlisted in the military shortly after graduating. I would go on to earn my Green Beret, deploy to Iraq and Afghanistan several times, and then leave the military in 2013 to start a family with my wife, Renee. Upon getting out, we had our first child, my daughter, Vivian, and I finished my degree at Eastern Michigan University in biology and chemistry and matriculated into medical school. And while there, my wife, my daughter moved down to a Caribbean medical school. Our island was struck by, at the time, another pandemic called Zika virus. And we decided to return home and leave that opportunity to preserve our, at that time, unborn child, Theodore. We became pregnant while we were there. Came home, was grateful to have a safety net here when we did get back. The Affordable Care Act and Healthy Michigan allowed us to jump right into medical care and get the screenings that we needed at that time. And I eventually was able to get a job at the VA. I worked here in the county locally as a director of veteran services, and I started working on my MBA at the University of Michigan. And since then, I've started a company based right out of here in Howell, a tech company called YourCheck, and have really felt the need, like I did in 2004, to serve and help our country in what is a tumultuous time, being COVID and the different tensions that are around, and really felt that I could lend my voice and try to help make a difference for our community. Really looking to have a community that I felt I grew up in, a community that is respectful, a community that where the schools work for every family that's out there, that more people have opportunities like I felt I had when I was young and graduating high school, and really have that place set up for when my children are older as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that. And for the rest of the time, I will ask you 3 questions, and you will have a 2-minute time limit for each question. So sure. The first question is, what do you consider your top 3 priorities and or critical issues that you will address if elected? Yeah,
so my top 3 priorities are number 1, healthcare in Michigan. Number two, infrastructure, particularly around broadband internet, and then also education. And the two of those are very closely tied. When I was, younger growing up, the internet in school was not as big of a deal, obviously, as it is now, particularly during COVID, but even before. I live in Howell, downtown Howell, so we have great internet. But when I would go to other parts of the district before I even decided to run, you would see kids in fast food parking lots or sitting inside fast food restaurants so they could have access to the internet. And it was really because they lived in parts of the county that had very poor service. And you'd see them there, they'd be there studying late at night, and it wasn't the best way that we should be investing, these children should be investing their time out of the home in these places just to be able to educate themselves. And it really spoke to unequal education opportunities within our own communities. And that's a huge priority to adjust and fix. So as you look at infrastructure and education, those two being really closely tied in this scenario, it becomes really apparent that this should be a priority. Making sure that every part of Livingston County has access to multiple service providers for high-speed broadband internet with low latency, which is not the case right now, so that these children can have adequate education opportunities and get into great colleges or get into great apprenticeships and other programs. The other part when it comes to healthcare is to make sure that healthcare in Michigan is accessible to everybody, which really it currently is not. And the problem is that the total body health is not really being addressed. When it comes to, dental care or mental health services, Michigan ranks, in the bottom 10 in the nation in mental health services. And that's really been a decades-long problem that's been building up over time. Dental care is not covered by a lot of people's insurance plans, and that needs to be addressed, right? Because, after attending medical school and my undergrad, you really find that, diet becomes a huge part of your personal health. And when you have people who don't have access to proper dental care, then they typically don't have great diets because of it, because of the foods they feel that they can even eat. So what comes in ends up not being the greatest sources and ends up to further problems down the road, exacerbating these problems. So we really need to be able to address in healthcare, number one, prices and costs of drugs and healthcare, but also to make sure that people have access to total body healthcare so that they're being addressed, as a whole person and not just this or that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And just a reminder, 2 minutes on each question. And for the second question, it is, what will you do to ensure Michigan's economy will survive the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically small businesses and the job market?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk and a lot of efforts to be made in investing in job training and job retraining, right? So I think what we'll find after COVID and through COVID is that we really need to address individual skills and how skills are going to be changing for the workforce of the future. And, it does go back to broadband internet access. There's a study commissioned by the state in 2018 that said if the over 1.3 million homes in the state were to be given broadband access immediately that do not have it now, there'd be a $2.5 billion economic benefit to the state, right? So as we look at the economy going forward, the economy is going to continue to trend more towards gig work, internet-based work, distance work. And our county right now is not really, in the district, 47th district, is not really set up to put people in positions to take advantage of that. Right. So that is the first thing that really needs to happen to make sure that people in the future of the economy in Livingston County is survivable after COVID and provides people more benefits after COVID across the state as well. So investing in job retraining, there's going to be, ebbs and flows in manufacturing and construction trades, but there should be more opportunity given to people over the internet to supplement their income, go through job retraining, continue their education, maybe re-educate themselves on certain skills as our economy transitions to a more digital age.
Thank you so much. And the final question is, what kinds of policies will you pursue to promote equal funding per pupil in K-12 education in Michigan?
Yeah, so that's a tough question, right? And I would like to think that not equal funding, but equal education is really at the root of this. I think people look towards the funding specifically, and there's a lot of studies out there. People will throw out, well, teachers in Michigan get paid more when you take in cost of living than most other states. And what we should really be looking at is that funding going towards an adequate education more so than all of these other things that people would like to speak on. Now, funding is still important. We still need to be able to pay teachers. We still need money coming into the schools, but we should really be thinking about how we evaluate how that funding goes into the schools when it comes to like school testing, teacher pay, funding for facilities. And then we should also address and understand that some communities are better off because they are able to pass and afford millages to supplement funding for their schools. So these are where we really see disparities across the education landscape in Michigan. And, like the city of Detroit recently upped their teacher pay, which is great. You think about kids that are growing up there, that's an entire workforce that's coming out of the city of Detroit, where they have very low skill levels when you compare them to, schools in like Livingston County. And funding is a part of that, but it's not the ultimate answer, right? So we really need to be able to reevaluate how we allocate funding based on test scores, based on where people live, and also how those communities are addressing the problems themselves.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time and taking a minute to talk with us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
So to begin, I will love it if you can give a 1-minute introduction to yourself.
Okay. First off, I'd like to thank Janelle, Zoe, and your team for hosting this event. It's exciting to see young people getting involved in politics, because that's what we need, the next generation to come along and understand what's going on in the country. A lot of turmoil on both sides of the issue, whether you're Democrat, Republican, and Independent. But as Americans, we need to come together and do better than in my generation, the World War II generation, and then I'm just after that. But we always used to get along, and I don't see that. So that's a little bit disturbing. So congratulations on pursuing this career. It's a tough career, but congratulations. I wish you the best. I'll start off by I graduated from Wall Lake Central, which is just a little east of here, about 30 or 40 miles. I've been coming out to Livingston County since 1968. I had friends live out here. I loved the county. I served in Vietnam Army, 70-71. So upon coming home, I moved my family. My wife and I had just gotten married when I returned home. We've been married 48 years. We have 3 daughters. All of them went to Howell High School. So we got a little bit of, green and gold there. So we got that going. I started my career in 73 as a young deputy. I worked my way up. I was promoted to detective, and then, ultimately I became lieutenant of the road patrol, under sheriff, under Don Holman, who was the sheriff. And when he retired in 2004, I ran and was elected 3-term sheriff, 2004, 2008, and 2012. Decided to retire at the end of 2016, and then I ran for county commissioner, where I currently hold that position. I was elected in 2016 and then 2018. So I've got a long history of community service, law enforcement career, obviously. And I've been involved with Salvation Army, Big Brothers Big Sisters. We started the Bowl-a-thon back when I was just a young detective, so very proud of that program. So a lot of community involvement. Right now, I've decided to run for the 47th district because there's a few issues. The law enforcement, the men and women that serve in law enforcement, 99.9% of them are great people. We have problem childs, or what I would call them, problem childs. We've had that. But every profession has that. And as administrators, we need to identify those and get those people out of law enforcement. But by far, the men and women serve this community as well as around the United States with honor and dignity. So I I'm kind of concerned about the direction that we're going in law enforcement. And then on the military side, I've got a passion for the military. We have 22 veterans that are committing suicide each day. So I'm the vice chair of Livingston County Veterans Affairs. I'm the chair of public safety, so I'm involved in those two issues. So that's pretty much a quick snapshot of my career, and I'm open to any questions. Looking forward to talking to you guys tonight. And
perfect. Thank you so much. And now we will move on to the next section. So
Okay.
there will be 3 questions, and you will have 2 minutes to answer each question.
Okay.
So for the first question, it is, what do you consider your top 3 priorities that you will address if elected?
Well, I had a meeting with the pro tem speaker a few weeks ago, and obviously my background is in law enforcement and military, but my interest is in technology. I'm getting pretty good at this Zoom stuff, so I'm pretty proud of myself. My grandchildren, I've been in training now for the last 10 years. My grandchildren know more about technology than I do, but I'm up and coming, and I'm eager to learn. Anytime you go and join, this is kind of out of my comfort zone, to be honest with you, because law enforcement has been my life. So I'm a little apprehensive, but exciting at the same time. You have 110 other, 110 counting me if I'm lucky enough to be elected. So you have to give and take. You have to work with the other House district House representatives. So I'm looking forward to that. But my 3 top right now would be probably law enforcement, technology, healthcare, and we have a lot of other issues. COVID. There's a lot of important issues out there. So I don't want to minimize any of the important stuff either. But those probably would be my top 3.
Perfect. Thank you. And the next question is, what will you do to ensure Michigan's economy will survive the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically small businesses and the job market?
That's a great question, and it's one that we're struggling with right now on local level. Even as a county commissioner, we're dealing with those issues on a local basis. But state, I'll be dealing with those issues next year. COVID is obviously snuck up on us. N1, I think I'm going to get this right, H1N1, right? It was in 09, and that was a serious virus, but it didn't hit us nearly as hard as COVID. Learning a lot about COVID, and hopefully in the near future we'll have a vaccine for it. But we've learned a lot: social distancing, mask. Who's the most vulnerable is people with pre-existing conditions. So we've learned a lot about how to protect ourselves. But the important thing moving forward is to get our economy back and running. We have get our workers back to work. It's frustrating for a lot of people that I've talked to, even as a county commissioner. They can't pay their bills. They can't support their family. And we see a rise in domestic violence. We see a rise in drug use and suicide. So it has some unintended consequences when you shut down the economy. So moving our economy forward has got to be a priority. Small businesses, you got to protect small businesses, get our farmers back working and producing. And you do that by less regulations. I'm from the Ronald Reagan era where, government is not the solution. Government is sometimes the problem. So government needs to move out of the way and let the men and women who make this country great move it forward. And you do that by less regulations, less taxes, and getting small businesses back and up and running, and hiring people. And that in an end around way, that gives people more money in their pockets. It gets the economy moving faster. So that would be probably my 2-minute response for that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the final question is, what kinds of policies will you pursue to promote equal funding per student for K-12 education in Michigan?
I should have said education was right there as well, because I have been looking at education issues for not only Livingston County, but for the entire state of Michigan. And obviously we'll be dealing with those issues. Michigan schools are 42nd, which is concerning. The overall ranking, I think, is 37. They've got 3 or 4 different categories. So I think we're like 37th. And there's a problem with being 37th. Our teachers are paid 13th in the country. And I'm not saying that, benefits and wages and those type of issues are the answer or the solution. But what I am saying is we need to look at, there's the top three to five states, Massachusetts, Florida, New Jersey, New Hampshire, they're always in the top 4 or 5. So why are they so much better than what we are? So I think we need to look at a number of different issues. Same thing as law enforcement. We deal with the same problems. Every time they make a policy change, one of my frustrations as the sheriff was they'd make a policy change or a law change, but they would not consult with those that are actually doing the job on the streets. So I'm looking forward to having representation in the law enforcement, but I'm also very concerned about education. I have 8 grandkids. They all have gone to charter schools. And there's some controversy between public and charter schools, but I believe in competition, and I believe in parents having the choice on a number of different issues, but certainly for education. As a parent, if I want to send you to a certain school or send my kids to a certain school, I should have that right to do that. And I think that makes public schools even better. A little bit of a controversial issue there, I know, but I think open discussion, competition, and it will make our system better, and at least move us forward, move us to in the top 10 anyway. That would be my goal, to try to get our school districts in the top 10. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay.
Yes, thank you. And that concludes the questions for you. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for taking the time to come and speak at this forum.
I want you guys to know before I leave you go, Zoe, is that I've done 30 to 35 surveys for various different groups, and I've done a few forums and I've debates and everything. But this one I was looking forward to the most because it's very, very encouraging. I talk to my grandkids about getting involved in your community and knowing what the issues are, and when you vote smartly, and be independent. Don't be led by somebody else's opinion. Form your own opinions, make your own judgments, and it's amazing how smarter I got the older I got too, by the way. so keep that in mind, but it's very exciting. I look forward to doing this interview with young students, because you are our future. Just remember that, okay? But thank you so much.
My name is Elissa Chandler. I'm a senior at Howell High School, and I'm involved in student government because I love to be a part of a process that makes positive changes in the lives of students. Plus, it's also a really nice way to develop and grow in my leadership skills. At this time, Congresswoman Slotkin, we invite you to give us a 1-minute introduction of yourself before we start questions.
Sure. So I'm Elissa Slotkin, the current representative of Michigan's 8th District. I'm a 3rd-generation Michigander. I live on my family farm in Hawley, Michigan. My background is exclusively in national security. I'm a former CIA officer and Pentagon official. I did 3 tours in Iraq alongside the military, and I'm married to my husband, Dave, who spent 30 years in the Army. So we are a service family. And in the district, I work on the issues that people talk to me about the most, which is the price of healthcare, the price of prescription drugs, clean water, especially in Livingston County with PFAS in some of our lakes, and then bringing some civility and decency to Washington. So it's been the best thing I've ever done, the greatest honor of my life to be the representative, and I hope to be able to do it a second time.
Great, thank you. All right, so we have 3 questions for you. You have 2 minutes to answer each question. So for our first one, what do you consider your top 3 priorities and/or critical issues you will address if you are reelected?
Sure. So I mentioned the price of healthcare and price of prescription drugs. That one's very personal to me because my mother, when she was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer, she did not have health insurance. She had struggled her whole life to afford it because she had a pre-existing condition. So those issues are particularly close to my heart, and I see my mom and everyone who comes up to me in the grocery store or on the street who can't afford their health insurance or their prescription drugs. Clean water, as we talked about, because we're the Great Lakes state, and so we're the stewards of the Great Lakes. It's our responsibility to make sure that they're preserved, but also our local green areas, our rivers, our streams, our watersheds, and of course our drinking water. Civility and decency is a big one. I refuse to believe that we can't disagree without being disagreeable. And Michigan has a long tradition until recently of being a swing state and being able to have different political views. I deeply believe in bipartisanship. I worked for both Democrats and Republicans in 15 years in national security, very proudly. And so I reject the idea that we have to have these terrible polarized politics. And the one that really got me lately comes from COVID and my experience of not being able to get masks and gloves for our local nurses and doctors and first responders. So I've become obsessed with this idea of making more medical supplies and pharmaceuticals in the United States. Just passed 7 bills in September, totally bipartisan, on allowing us to do that. So that's my latest, just intense focus.
Thank you. All right. For our second question, what specific steps will you take to address the political divide in the United States right now?
So the big thing is, I'm a member of something called the Problem Solvers Caucus, and it's the only truly bipartisan caucus in the U.S. House of Representatives that meets every week and works on common legislation. We have to be able to have forums where we actually sit and talk around a table together. Right now, people are in these silos. They're very separated, and we need an opportunity for people to come together safely and responsibly to be able to talk about politics and policy. I also think my role as a member of Congress is to be a convener of folks who might otherwise never be in the same room together. So we've started to do that, particularly after the murder of George Floyd, where I had a ton of African-American leaders on Zoom calls day after day and week after week, talking about problems that they saw, for instance, with the banking industry and not being able to get their first loans. We brought people together from the Michigan Banking Association and these African-American business owners to talk about those issues. So I see my role as a convener to try and bring the temperature down on politics, have those hard conversations in a safe and responsible way. And in 2020, I think that's part of the job description for a member of Congress.
Thank you. The last question. The coronavirus pandemic has highlighted how heavily we rely on other countries for medical supplies. What steps will you take to bring manufacturing of these goods back to the United States, or more specifically, Michigan?
Camille, you're singing my song, man. I mean, it's a great question. I'll pay you later for that question. For me, as a congresswoman, I found myself on the phone in the middle of the night, arguing with a Chinese middleman to get a 78-cent mask into Michigan, where we make more things than any other country in the state. Something has gone terribly wrong if that's what's going on. And that's because we've outsourced those supply chains to China and to other countries. So I come originally from the Pentagon. That was my background, where you better believe we make our military equipment in the United States, our body armor, our meals ready to eat, our tanks, our planes. We make them in the United States because there are Buy American requirements. We don't outsource that to other countries because it would put us at risk if we needed to mobilize quickly. And that's exactly what happened to us in March and April. So I'm interested in putting those same Buy American requirements on medical supplies and pharmaceuticals. And we just approved in the House a $400 million pilot program to have these public-private partnerships where we go to Michigan companies who make, for instance, pharmaceuticals and say government will pay into opening another line so you can produce even more pharmaceuticals. So we make it here and not in other countries. So there's a bunch of things we can do from a policy perspective. Those are just a couple of things. But like I said, I'm pretty obsessed with this issue because it combines my national security background with my Michigan manufacturing interests.
Thank you so much for taking the time to answer our questions today.
Of course. They were great. And hello to all the other students who are behind their screen. I recognize Zoe there for half a second, and I hope you're well, Zoe, but thanks for doing this, guys. I appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Piper McCullough, and I'm a senior from Pinckney Community High School, and I am the president of student government. And I'm in student government to gain leadership skills and to serve my community. And I would like to thank you for this opportunity today. Candidate Junge, will you please give us a 1-minute introduction about yourself, and then we will begin?
Okay, so are we going to do like a 5-minute Q&A, and is this introduction part of that? How's it all going to kind of work?
So first you give a 1-minute introduction about yourself, and then I'll ask you 3 different questions, and you will have 2 minutes to respond to each question.
Okay, my name is Paul Junge. I am the Republican candidate for Congress here in Michigan's 8th District. My name, as I said, is Paul Junge, but I spell my last name a little different. It's Junge. So if you're looking for more information about me, you can see it at my website, pauljunge.com. I live in Brighton. I am a first-time candidate for office, and as I've been campaigning in Ingham, Livingston, and North Oakland County that all make up part of this district, I know that the people in this district are hungry for change in our representation. They feel like the current candidate ran and made promises to be kind of moderate and that she would not pursue impeachment, but then instead did pursue impeachment and in fact votes 96% of the time with Nancy Pelosi. So I'm going to be a representative, should I be elected, who will listen to the people of this district and work hard on their priorities.
Thank you. Again, you will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. So the first question is, what do you consider your top 3 priorities and/or critical issues that you will address if you are elected?
Well, I think we've all seen what a just strong impact the coronavirus has had on us, both as a health issue and in economic, and really how we can live our life type of issue. So responding to the coronavirus is going to be a top priority. And I feel that not because of something I've decided on my own, but as I talked with constituents across the district, I know it's a top priority for them. And that means we've got to have more testing and more abilities to find treatments. We've got to find a vaccine because we have to feel good about how we respond to this virus, and it really is a health issue first. But we also want, and I think most people want, to be able to get back to work safely. They want to be able to get back to school safely. And so it's not just a health issue, it's also a economic and how we live our lives type of issue. The second issue I know I want to work on is, in fact, the economy and jobs. Before the coronavirus, we had record low unemployment, and that was true across all specters of society. And we had incomes on the rise, and that was especially true at the low income of the income spectrum. So having a tax and regulatory system that stays as limited as possible so that people can innovate and grow and create jobs. We need to continue the child tax credit. We need to continue to expand opportunity zones because people absolutely want to be able to get back to work and get back to work safely. And I think the third is to continue policies, whether it's trade policies or other type of economic policies that put America first. Another thing that the coronavirus has shown us is that being vulnerable to foreign sourcing, particularly Chinese sourcing of the production of prescription drugs or medical equipment, is just not an acceptable position for us to be in. So it has a component of creating jobs, but it also has a component of being able to whether it's national security or just national health security, making sure we have the capacity to take care of ourselves.
Thank you. The second question is, what specific steps will you take to address the political divide in the United States right now?
Well, I think part of my thinking about making sure you reach out to all people and show that you value their opinions and that you will represent them, even if you don't take the same view on an issue, goes to what I was saying in my introduction. So a lot of it is listening to people in your district, meeting with people in your district, and talking with them about what's important to them. And while you won't be able to agree all the time, it's healthy and important to have those discussions so that you know what their priorities are. And very often, even if you do start off with a slight disagreement, you can find areas of common interest and concern, and you can make adjustments to your pursuit of things that can accommodate other points of view. I think another part of that, though, is just the way you conduct yourself. I was a high school speech and debate guy. I was a television reporter. And I would say also just kind of the way my parents raised me, which was about showing respect to others and conducting yourself in the language that you use that shows that you care about others and that you're not just out there looking to score a political point or put others down. I think all of that can play an important role in showing that we value people and looking for areas of commonality when they're there.
Thank you. And our last question is, the coronavirus pandemic has highlighted how heavily we rely on other countries for medical supplies.
Okay.
What steps will you take to bring manufacturing of these goods back to the United States, or more specifically, Michigan?
Well, I think your question is a good one, and the coronavirus, as your question points out, really highlights the fact that we had allowed too much of our manufacturing, particularly around prescription drugs or medical equipment, to go offshore, and particularly to China. And I think this is one issue in particular that President Trump's leadership was really out front about. He was raising this issue back in 2016 when the more kind of American consensus was that free trade was a unmitigated good, but of course, what we need is trade that makes sure we recognize the needs and the interests of the American marketplace and the American worker. So I think when we negotiate trade deals, we need to make sure that we don't have vulnerabilities. We need to make sure that Americans can take care of themselves, and that we make a priority that in keeping industries here so that we can respond to emergencies that will also have a positive employment effect as well.
Thank you. That was our last question.
Right.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Hartman, would you like to give a 1-minute introduction about yourself and your candidacy?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. My name is Joe Hartman. I am the Libertarian candidate on the ballot. So that's the third party. The Libertarian Party is the largest third party in the country, the only other nationwide party. And I decided to get on the ballot this year to make some noise about individual liberty and advocate for peace and free speech and free markets and reducing the power of the federal government. Libertarians look at the political system differently than the Republicans and Democrats. And so I ran to have some fun and make some noise. And I consider myself just an average Joe millennial. I'm from South Florida, so I've only lived in this area for a couple years, but this is our home, and I'm very happy I've had a lot of fun on the campaign trail, and I'm excited to talk with you all today.
Okay, thank you. So my first question is, what do you consider your top 3 priorities and or critical issues that you will address if you are elected?
So I would start with reducing the role of the U.S. military around the world, bringing the troops home, ending the wars that have been going on for all of your entire lives. Another one is abolishing the drug war. The drug laws that have interfered with people's ability to live freely has created a lot more conflict in our society and expanded the role of law enforcement in a way that predictably has led to more and more violence. And so reducing the ability of law enforcement to use means such as civil asset forfeiture to reduce the militarization of the police. And to really, advocate for drastically changing the drug war, or ending the drug war, and allowing people to live freely and engaging in voluntary interactions. And instead of locking them in cages if they, make bad decisions, that there be other options out there in a free society that doesn't treat people who are struggling as criminals, who aren't hurting anyone else. And my third option, or my third main issue, would be, just across the board in every way, reducing the power of the federal government, reducing the regulatory state from, the EPA to the FDA to the other agencies that just meddle in so many of the localized decision-making processes. And so my motivation for my campaign, my ideological hero in terms of legislators has been Dr. Ron Paul. He inspired me to become a libertarian and really change the way that I look at the world. And he was often one of the only no votes in many votes. So hypothetically, in the case that I were in Congress, I would just be voting against most of the two big parties' efforts to make government bigger and to wield more power over the America as a whole. So yeah, decentralize, deregulate, and decriminalize. That's the goal.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, what specific steps will you take to address the political divide in the United States right now?
Yeah, so I see the libertarian message as the most unifying argument out there. The Democrats and Republicans, I think, generally my impression is that most politicians are probably well-intended people who are trying to, get in positions to wield power and prevent the other team that they consider to be so bad from wielding power. So a lot of it just gets so bogged down in petty partisan, ideas, where the libertarian message, especially at the federal level, is to get the federal government out of the way, to allow, if states want to implement more progressive policies or other states want to have more conservative policies, that the unifying message of peace and freedom allows people to have more self-determination. And so the decisions could be made on a more decentralized level. And so instead of having so much, micromanaging and so much nitpicking by the federal government, creating arbitrary rules that impose one-size-fits-all limitations on individuals and businesses across the board, that working to reduce the power of the federal government, return it to something more like what the Constitution envisioned, is the most unifying message out there, because then it allows people to have more determination over how their local governments are run and how their state governments are run. And, the laboratory of experimentation that would be empowered by states having more control and reducing the efforts of the federal government. So I think at the federal level, for the Congress and for Libertarian presidential candidate Joe Jorgensen, I think that the message of the Libertarian argument being the federal government should do way less and meddle way less in people's lives is the only path towards unification. As long as the Democrats and Republicans are in charge and, using so much of their efforts to criticize the Republicans and Democrats and just, always trying to pit people against each other and stoke these just silly. And I a lot of times I have a hard time even listening to much of the political rhetoric, because I feel like it's so often in such bad faith, and it's so manipulative in a way of just trying to convince people who are somewhat moderate that the other team is more dangerous. And so the Libertarian Party is, those people should have way less power, and in that way they would be way less dangerous. So that's my pitch for liberty and unity.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, the coronavirus pandemic highlighted how heavily we rely on other countries for medical supplies. What steps would you take to bring back manufacturing of these goods to the United States, or more specifically, the state of Michigan?
Yeah, it's a really good question. This is something that Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin has done some work on, and I think that she had some good ideas in there, but a lot of it came down to just kind of subsidizing U.S. production. And for my perspective, a big part of the reason why the U.S. economy has become so reliant on foreign supply chains, especially for medical devices, is because of the expansive regulations that interfere with the ability to manufacture goods in the U.S. And so, lowering the tax rate on many of the medical supplies, as well as getting rid of a lot of the regulations that create incredibly high costs to producing the medical devices and products needed in the U.S. So instead, companies are essentially forced to, get goods from other countries, specifically China for the most part. And so I think, as much as possible, trying to change the regulatory capture of that system would be the best way to incentivize companies to make more things in the U.S. to have a more stable supply chain. So I think that's the angle that we'd want to go to it, but I think it's a very important issue.
Okay, thank you for your time today and good luck on the campaign trail.
Hi, my name is Sydney Furge, and I am an 11th grader at Hartland High School. And I wanted to participate in the Meet the Candidates Forum because I have recently become more interested and involved in politics. And I just wanted to learn the different point of views of our Michigan politicians and political candidates. Senator Peters, if you would like, you can give a 1-minute introduction of yourself, and then we will begin with the questions.
Well, thank you, Sydney, and I appreciate that you're interested in the government and politics. It's incredibly important for you to do that. Well, I am currently the United States Senator representing the state of Michigan. My background, I spent 20 plus years in the business world as a assistant vice president and vice president with major investment firms, helping families plan for retirement, giving investment advice, helping small businesses build retirement plans and grow and prosper. Also, I had the opportunity to serve my country in the U.S. Navy Reserve, rose to the rank of lieutenant commander. And since I've been in the Senate, I've been working in a bipartisan way, bringing groups together to solve some of the tough problems that we face here in Michigan as well as around the country. In fact, I'm ranked as one of the most bipartisan Democratic senators. The Georgetown University ranked me the 3rd most bipartisan. And even groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has recently awarded me their inaugural Jefferson Hamilton Award for bipartisanship, my willingness to reach across the aisle, find common ground, get things done. And as a result of that, as an example, over the last 2 years alone, I have actually authored and passed more bills through the United States Senate than any other United States senator, either Democratic or Republican. It's about getting things done for the people of Michigan. Those bills have included helping veterans transition into civilian life to make sure that they have the skills necessary to get good paying jobs. It's been about protecting the Great Lakes, border security, lowering the cost of prescription drugs. And it is what we can accomplish if we're willing to find common ground. You know, I'm a Democrat, but I believe in order to solve the tough problems, we have to find common ground. Many folks talk about it, but I've actually demonstrated, and my record is very clear. And I look forward to having the opportunity to do more of that over the next 6 years.
Thank you so much. So now we will begin the questions. There are 3 questions, and you will have 2 minutes to answer each of them. So we'll begin with the first question, which is, what do you consider your top 3 priorities and/or critical issues you will address if you are reelected?
Well, I think the number one issue, without question, is getting through this COVID crisis. We have to deal with what is perhaps the most significant crisis any of us will have in our lifetime. At least I hope this will be the most significant, because this is incredibly challenging. It's both a public health crisis as well as an economic crisis. That's why I've worked to make sure during the crisis people can have access to the resources they need to keep food on the table and a roof over their head. I authored the Pandemic Assistance Act, for example, which expanded unemployment eligibility to folks who normally wouldn't be able to access unemployment. They'll include small business owners that saw their business suddenly dry up, but they were in critical need to make sure they had the resources for their family. That bill actually was incorporated into the CARES Act and has helped hundreds of thousands of folks in our state. But I'm particularly focused on small business, understanding that we cannot get back up on our feet and get this economy going as quickly as any of us would like if small businesses don't survive. That's why I worked on the Paycheck Protection Program, which provided resources to small businesses to keep people on the payroll, to keep their business open. And now we are in a situation where this pandemic, unfortunately, has lasted a whole lot longer than any of us would like. And we have to really extend that runway. So we need to continue to provide resources, particularly for those small businesses that have been the hardest hit and are really struggling. That's why we need to have another package going through. And I want to focus particularly on those industries that are ones that may not recover as quickly as a result of the pandemic. You know, think of the hospitality industry, our restaurants, and folks folks in that industry that will have a hard time, particularly as we get into these winter months. And so I'll be focused on that in the next term. And as a result of that, also making sure that people have access to quality, affordable health care. I think it's absolutely essential. We've seen huge gaps in what is available to folks. And when you're in a middle pandemic, people are certainly fearful about the virus, but are fearful when they come out of hospital, if they're hospitalized, that they're going to have large bills. The financial insecurity associated with that is something that we need to address, not just for dealing with this pandemic, but also dealing in the years ahead. And I plan to continue to work on expanding those affordable options so that everybody can have access to quality, affordable health care.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Our next question is, what specific steps will you take to address the political divide in the United States right now?
Well, I think that's critically important. I mentioned it in some of my opening comments. What I'm most concerned about long term for this country is this partisan divide. We all are kind of retreating into individual silos and are forgetting that in order to really solve the really tough problems that we face as a country, we've got to come together. We've got to find that kind of common ground. That's why as I work each day in the U.S. Senate, I always work as much as I can with Republican colleagues so that we can come together as a Democrat and a Republican to address the tough issues. I've been recognized as at Georgetown University. The Lugar Center there actually ranks all members of Congress on how we work together in a bipartisan way. The most recent ranking, I was ranked the third most bipartisan Democrat in the U.S. Senate. And when you do that, when you find that common ground, you can pass meaningful legislation that helps folks here in Michigan and around the country. You know, for example, a bill that I recently wrote, it was just signed into law by President Trump, will expand apprenticeship opportunities for veterans as they're coming off of active duty, use their GI Bill to get skills that lead to very good paying jobs. Usually you think about the GI Bill as helping someone who is going to college, getting a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, but it can also be used for apprenticeships. And those apprenticeships, all those opportunities should be available to veterans. Right now, even though there are 1,100 registered apprenticeship programs by the Department of Labor in the United States, or in Michigan rather, only 100 or so qualify for GI benefits. That's unacceptable to me. Someone who has put themselves in harm's way and have served their country should have the full range of apprenticeships available to them. And that's what my legislation does. And now we're going to be able to give veterans the opportunity to get up on their feet and have a fulfilling, good paying job in the civilian sector. And I did that by bringing folks together in a bipartisan way, coming together with a problem. And, you know, I basically used my business experience, spending over 20 years in private business. I didn't look at the problems that I had to deal with in managing offices and being a financial advisor with a partisan lens on. I did it in a way that said, here's a problem. How do we figure it out? Let's come together to do it. Let's use language that allows us to communicate in a way that brings people together. And I've been able to accomplish that. And I'm proud of that record. And I believe that, you know, many folks talk about being bipartisan and finding common ground. I've actually demonstrated it over the last 6 years. And quite frankly, I think that's what we want in Michigan. We're common sense Midwesterners. We want folks to roll up their sleeves, find common ground, and get the job done. And I've demonstrated that time and time again.
Thank you. Our final question is, the coronavirus pandemic has highlighted how heavily we rely on other countries for medical supplies. What steps will you take to bring manufacturing of these goods back to the United States and more specifically back to Michigan?
Well, that's an incredibly important question, and one that I actually highlighted last year. I'm the ranking member. I'm the top Democrat on the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, and actually had committee staff research last year what is a problem in this country, and that's our overdependence on foreign supplies for critical medical supplies, including drugs. In fact, if you think of the precursors, these are the chemicals that go into nearly every drug that is produced. Nearly all of that is produced overseas. 80% is overseas, most of it from China. And that includes surgical masks, it includes gowns, it includes the swabs that are used to take tests, COVID tests, for example. And in that report, I came to a conclusion that when there is a pandemic in this country, we're going to be in serious trouble. Little did I know, just a few months after that, here we are in a pandemic. We are dependent on these foreign supplies, and we saw shortages and continue to see shortages in those supplies. Now, I served, as I mentioned, in the U.S. Navy Reserve. I serve on the Armed Services Committee, which oversees the U.S. military. And I focus on how do we make sure we have an industrial supply base that ensures that we have security at time of war. As an example, you know, as a naval officer in the reserves, I can tell you that we should never, and we won't ever buy U.S. Navy warships from China. That's simply unacceptable. We have to make sure we have shipyards here in the United States that can build warships. We actually have one that many Michiganders work on the border with Wisconsin that makes the Navy littoral combat ship. And we make sure that we have the skills here in this country. We have the ability to do that. We have to look at medical supplies in the same way. These are life-saving drugs. These are life-saving supplies that are really integral to our national security, to our homeland security. And that's why I'm working on legislation to identify where those gaps are and then work to develop the manufacturing sector necessary to make sure we're making it here in our country. The one thing we do here in Michigan, we do it very well and better than anyone in the country, is we know how to make things. As we look to onshore and bring production back from China and other places with medical supplies, that's going to mean we're going to be creating good paying jobs here in Michigan. We have to make that a focus. You know, when I did the report last year, it was theoretical. Now that we're in this pandemic, we know this is indeed true and something that I will focus on in the next 6 years. And it's really tied to an effort that I'm working on called the National Institute of Manufacturing, where I've been working with companies all across the state, working with the business school at the University of Michigan and others to figure out how we can coordinate manufacturing at the federal level, make it more cost effective, streamline it, save taxpayer money, while finding ways that we can help, particularly our smaller manufacturers, compete globally. We have the best workers, the best engineers anywhere in the world. We just have to make sure we're finding ways to really help those small companies compete globally. And that will make us more secure and really lead to our national security and homeland security.
Thank you so much for your time today, Senator Peters, to answer these questions that we have come up for you.
Great. Well, thank you. It's great to be with you.